Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning. Welcome to our fourth iteration of the Kata Kota Urban Talk. Today we are discussing a very exciting topic, which is housing. Why is housing so expensive in Malaysia? Before that, let me do some introductions. I am Sarly. I'm your host today and I'm your moderator. As you well know, I've been around PAM, so no need so much introduction. We also have with us today the chairperson for the Housing and Urban Wellbeing Committee, Arkitek Nur Zakia Arshad. So before we introduce the speakers, I would like to call upon Arkitek Nur Zakia to give some opening remarks with regard to the program and with regard to the efforts of HUW. Yeah. Thank you. Please proceed, Arkitek Nur Zakia.
A very good morning to all and Assalamualaikum to all participants. Thank you, our moderator, Arkitek Sarly. And I think we are very fortunate today that we are having this talk on the very good issue and most spoken about around in Malaysia. Okay, the topic that we are talking about is housing in Malaysia is so expensive. Housing is so expensive in Malaysia, direction. And we are also very fortunate today that we have a lineup of speakers that will be discussing on the topic why housing in Malaysia is very expensive. Okay, among the speakers, we have Dr. Carmelo Ferlito and Arkitek Datuk and Arkitek Mustapha Kamal, Dr. Asrul, and Arkitek Nasharuddin Abdul Majid. So I think these people are very much experienced in housing industry and development, and as well as in the projects that they have undertaken. And these speakers are well aware and they are nationwide as well as abroad. Their experience is quite vast and they can discuss, and let us all sit back and listen to what they're going to discuss and issues that they're going to bring about. And I think I will move on and allow our moderator to proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arkitek Nur Zakia. Without further ado, let me introduce the speakers. As I mentioned, there are 5 speakers today, as also mentioned by Arkitek Nur Zakia. The first speaker is Dr. Carmelo Ferlito. He was born in Verona, Italy in 1978. He's the CEO of the Center of Marketing Education and the Research Advisory for Provalindo Nusa Property in Jakarta, Indonesia. He's also a Senior Fellow at the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs Ideas in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and a Senior Fellow at the Property Rights Alliance in Washington, D.C. Dr. Ferlito earned a Master's in Economics and a PhD in Economics History from the University of Verona in Italy. Dr. Ferlito is an author of 5 books and more than 30 scientific papers. He has applied his theoretical analysis to political studies, in particular to Malaysian and Indonesian property markets and housing policies, and to the issues of tax reform, financial literacy, cost of living, and agricultural policies. For our second speaker, we have Datuk Arkitek Hojia Lit. Datuk Arkitek Hojia Lit holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Australia. He's a co-founder of Arkitek Summaz, which was nominated for the 1995 Aga Khan Award for Architecture for the Sabah Parks Administration and Research Centre at Kinabalu Parks. He has an extensive experience in nature and ecotourism related works under the Sabah Wildlife Department, Sabah Parks, and the Sabah Forestry Department. He also designed the 200-acre Lok Kawi Wildlife Park in Kota Kinabalu. Arkitek Ho was the past chairman of PAM Sabah chapter for 2009-2011. He was a member of Lembaga Arkitek Practice Committee from 2009-2018. He was a council member of PAM KL from 2009-2011. Arkitek Ho is currently appointed by the TYT as a member of the State Planning Council under the Ministry of Local Government. Next speaker, we have Arkitek Mustapha Kamal. Arkitek Mustapha Kamal Zulkarnain is an Auckland University alumnus from New Zealand and has been practicing architecture for the past 27 years. He is a fellow member of the Malaysian Institute of Architects and has served 6 terms as PAM Council member in 1997 to 2000 and 2014-2017. He still sits in various PAM committees like Housing, Urban and Wellbeing, Media and Publications, as well as Sustainability and the New Urban Agenda. He was also a devoted Rotarian. He is also heading the task force in PAM Strategic Plan 2030 on architecture, cities now and the future. I think the CV that he actually sent was quite numerous and long, so we summarize it as his achievements are very numerous. Suffice to say, he's well known in the field of urban resiliency. And if you've been watching this urban talks, he has always been here. Our next speaker is Dr. Asrul Mahjuddin Ressang Aminuddin. Dr. Asrul Mahjuddin Ressang Aminuddin is a senior lecturer and deputy dean at the Department of Architecture, and also as the lead auditor serving the Quality Management Enhancement Center, QMAC, at University Malaya under the Vice Chancellor's Office. He holds a PhD in high-rise housing and sustainable design from the Nottingham University in the United Kingdom. Among his latest research and projects include Lembah Pantai and Kerinci housing, and also UM Care's Waste to Wealth projects, which has won first prize team national level together with High School Sciences in Rembau Negeri Sembilan. Dr. Asrul is actively involved in several committees in PAM and was a convener in the Icon Housing 2019 Symposium, which was successfully held in DBKL. And last but not least is our architect Nasharuddin Haji Abdul Majid. Architect Nasha is the principal of Arkitek Punca Cipta, based in Kuala Terengganu. For over 2 decades, since 1995, the firm had undertaken numerous housing projects with a fair share of success and surrender. He will talk on the peculiarity of housing affordability in the East Coast, particularly in Terengganu, and offer an unconventional solution to housing problems for consideration. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me pass the mic to our first speaker, Dr. Carmelo.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. Thank you very much for the nice introduction.
Sorry, Dr. Carmelo, we are seeing... okay, now it's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes. Thank you. Please proceed.
So, yeah, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself before. Okay, so the topic is a very intriguing topic for today, and as probably you are aware, I have discussed this topic in several occasions, also in a quite unconventional way in certain situations. Here at the beginning of my presentation, that I think will be made available to the audience later, you can find all my contact details. So if you need further clarification, you can refer to it. I will try to tackle the problem of affordability mostly from a policy perspective. Obviously, having only 10 minutes for discussion, it would be too long to tackle all the issue of why homes are affordable or not affordable in Malaysia. So we should discuss the housing cycle that started in 2008. Actually, I discussed this topic yesterday at REDA, so eventually you can refer at what I have discussed yesterday at REDA Institute. Before starting, I want to make a little premise on what does it mean to think like an economist when we analyze policies, and in this peculiar context, housing policies. Each policy has intended consequences which are in line with the desired outcome, but each policy has also unintended consequences, not in line with the desired outcome. And these unintended consequences can be good, but also very bad. So in policy making, good intentions are not enough. It's not enough to say that we act for the good of the poor or the B40 or the M40. We need to be conscious of the repercussions that we are going to produce. So it is important to recognize that reality is complex, and therefore policy making requires humbleness. And in doing this analysis, what we must recognize is the presence of trade-offs. A certain policy never comes free. So achieving a certain target implies giving away something else. So it is very important to get the trade-off right, in order to implement sound policy. In example, when we do policies to increment, to increase home ownership, what is going to happen to household debt? And how are home ownership and debt related with flexibility and mobility as desires of the people? So this is a little premise. And today, more specifically, I will discuss on how to measure affordability, the relation, if there is actually an issue between affordability and home ownership, the role of the secondary market, and the importance of social mobility. So discussing how to measure home affordability, I think that everybody takes in consideration almost exclusively the price-income ratio. So the median income in a nation, which is a very big territory, and the average price. This is not a good index. It's too simplistic, okay? And it doesn't take absolutely into account important elements like location, connectivity of job opportunities, or even the size of a house. A low PIR could be also a symptom of a bad area. So the price in a certain area can be low because it's a bad area, nobody wants to live there. So PIR per se is not a good indicator, okay? And I always try to make the people aware that index that are too synthetic and took into account too much aggregates are indeed not very useful for doing policy, for policy making. We need to go more into the detail of micro foundations. So what is affordable for me is not affordable for someone else. What is affordable here is not affordable in another area. And affordability per se is something more complicated. Now my center, the Center for Market Education, in cooperation with Provalindo Nusa in Indonesia, is working on a new index that tries to take into account this complexity. Secondly, we should look at this issue not only from a price issue, which is market-driven, but also from a perspective of a more general strategy for growth. So houses will become more affordable when the relative income will grow. So the most important thing to make houses more affordable is not to decrease their price, but to make people richer. So this is a different strategy. Second point, affordability and home ownership. Now, the affordability discussions go together with home ownership. Home, usually, this is how the discussion is put into policy. Homes should be affordable so to boost home ownership. But is home ownership really an issue in Malaysia? As per 2019, home ownership was 76.9% in Malaysia, reaching the peak of 86% in rural areas. So it's one of the highest home ownership rate in the world, okay? Much higher than the Western world, and probably the highest in Asia, if we exclude probably Singapore. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in policy, we should get right our priorities. Home ownership dogma push up household debt, okay? In 2019, the household debt was 82.7% of the GDP, or 1.25 trillion ringgit Malaysia. And the residential property debt accounts for 54% of this debt. This makes our rakyat in a dangerous position when a crisis comes, like the crisis that we are living. We are experiencing a very deep issue with what happened with COVID and the lockdowns. And therefore, people that are financially exposed are the ones that suffer more in moment of difficulties. So in policy making, there are no silver bullets. And therefore, it is important to identify the right policy priority. From the numbers in Malaysia, I think that home ownership is not an emergency, but household debt is. And this is all the more true because I think that by the end of this year, this figure of 82.7% is going to increase. People are losing job and GDP is going down, so the household debt may increase. And this is all the more true if we look at the statistics for the latest statistics for the overhang. So as you can see here, this is released by NEPIC, referring to H1, the first half of 2020. Basically, 10,000 out of 16,000 high-rise overhang are in the affordable range, so below 500K. For the terrace, we are talking about almost 6,000 out of 9,000 overhang is in the range of affordable homes. So it means that people are even not buying affordable homes for what is concerned of new launches. So there is not an emergency, there is not demand in the market for new homes, in particular for the affordable ones. And probably this is because the discussion on affordability is totally unbalanced toward prices on the primary market. Are we sure that the situation on the secondary market is not different? In fact, the secondary market accounts for a big chunk of the transactions. I think we are close to 80%. So when we focus our discussion on the new launches on the primary market, we are focusing our discussion only on 20% of the market, while the secondary market represents 80%, and their prices are even more interesting. So we should probably devote much more attention to this segment when we discuss affordability. Last point, and this is my proposal for policymakers, we should shift our discussion toward the issue of social mobility. So we should not discuss affordability per se, but social mobility. Home becomes affordable under this perspective, not because of artificial lowering of price or ambitious and often dangerous government programs, but because people are in the condition to grow their income and to choose to buy a house if they want. Let's not forget that different people have different preferences. Not everybody wants to be a homeowner. If you are a person that are present-oriented and prefer to travel, to explore the world, to be free from long-term financial commitment, you don't want to become a homeowner. You want to keep your hand loose. So the right perspective to look at affordability should focus on the fact that if people that are eventually poor are in the condition to grow their income and to become no more poor and eventually choose to buy a house. Under this perspective, the most important thing is to look at location, connectivity, and job opportunities. By focusing on projects that pay attention to these factors, people can become homeowners as a choice, as a free choice. Because if we think about home ownership or affordability as a task of the government give out cheap house to the poor. We have poor that have a roof but are still poor. A poor with a house is still a poor person. I think that our focus should be to get the poor out of poverty so that they can eventually buy a house if they want. So the role of government under this perspective should completely change. The government should stop building affordable houses that nobody wants and driving these agencies into deeply bad financial conditions. Focus on focus on social mobility. And under this perspective, I make two proposals. Proposals number one, move the developers into the discussion for private-public partnership on public transportations. Nowadays, the government build the public transports, an area revaluate, okay, and because of the revaluations, the developers enjoy windfall benefits in an indirect way, so passive income. Let's involve the developers in designing, building, and running public transport projects, so that they are responsible not simply for house development, but for urban development more holistically conceived. bring the developers into the discussion since day one, and consider the development of the area not simply as a home development from the developer perspective and transport from government perspective, bring this thing together into a new model of public and private partnership that is more complete. This is proposal number one. Proposal number two, with the government out of the picture in building affordable homes, have the government discussing with the developers to build projects in locations that are good from the social mobility perspective. That means location that give access to good job opportunities.
Sorry, Dr. Carmelo, time.
Sorry?
Can you have like a 30 seconds or 1 minute?
Yeah, this is the last slide. In these new developments, certain units are reserved for the needy, and the rent is subsidized by the government, but the subsidy is revoked once the people improve their social conditions. So moving from poverty to mobility and from ownership to flexibility. These are the two proposals for affordability that implies a new role for the government and a completely new strategy in tackling the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carmelo. Without further ado, I would like to call upon Datuk Arkitek Hojalid to present.
Hi everyone, welcome, and thank you for inviting me to give this talk, which I will speak more directly in a layman's term, or to get to a simple communication of information. Okay, why is housing so expensive in Malaysia? Stop, Sabah. Sorry. Okay, I start off by saying that birds and bees and animals living in our natural environment, they build their home freely and using natural resources. And back then, we humans live in caves, and along the way, some live in mud brick house, which is at very minimal cost. So how come we end up now today housing so expensive in Malaysia today? From my observation over the years, a few critical factors have contributed to our Malaysian home being labeled as unaffordable for many. More so because of people want to be closer to work in the urban area. However, like mentioned in the earlier talk, the location of the site can be far away, and the transportation and public transport and all that is not good for the people to work, and even is affordable, is mismatched. It's no point for the people to live in affordable home, but it's so far away with no proper transportation. From my general view from reading through the news, home affordability in general in Malaysia have actually fallen 1% annually over the last few years. As pointed out just then, I saw in the previous talk, it was also 76.9% of household ownership in West Malaysia, averaging house about 290,000. However, in Sabah, I think more than 50% we are facing severe unaffordability of housing due to a few reasons, which I will bring up on Sabah issues. So the government already recognized this affordability problem, and they have already collaborated with private sector since the year 2000 to try to look into public housing program. Example, as we all know, like Prima Homes, you know. Okay, this is a very important issue, especially in this page. We need to take note of Malaysian housing per value price. If you compare to other countries in the world, say Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong, or other place, actually it's cheap, value for money, you know. However, it is our low income gap and the growth, and the low growth in our GDP is not intended to the increase in the inflation of our country. So just to give you in a layman's term the comparison to understand, 45 years ago in 1975, a graduate salary per month is about 1,000 per month. But in today's year 2020, their salary is only 3,500. There's only 3.5 times increase. However, when we look back, in 1975, 45 years ago, a Honda Civic cost 11,000. Today, they cost around 110. That's 10 times the value increase. And in Sabah, 45 years ago, 1975, a typical double-story terrace house cost around $30,000. And today, it costs not 300,000, but 600,000. That's 20 times increase. So if you compare to the raise in the graduate salary, it's only 3.5 times. So this is one of those issues that makes it unaffordability as compared to houses in other countries. Okay, one of the main issues in Sabah is our high cost of living and doing business. A lot of people ask, why is it high cost? I just give you an example. To buy a typical Proton cars in Sabah, it's always few thousand more than in West Malaysia. You buy a newspaper like Star newspaper, it's cheaper, cost cheaper to buy in West Malaysia than in Sabah. So, and one of the major issues for the poor developers in Sabah is we have very poor infrastructures and transportation service. And a lot of developers, when they want to build houses, they have to contribute 100% to the cost of the SESP contribution to supply to their project site. They also have to pay for maybe for kilometers of roads from their development site to connect to the nearest government infrastructure roads or drains. And this is a hidden cost that a lot of people did not understand on the development of Sabah that cost a lot of increase in price to pass on to the poor buyer. Another thing is that a lot of people did not understand that we Sabah don't have UBBL. We are still using the local building bylaw that is about colonial days in the 1970s. And we need the government to actually step in. Very important actually for government to step in to help build more and better infrastructure and also to help update our bylaws to make it, the policies, the bylaws and policies to help assist faster and cheaper affordable homes. Another issue is Subsidy Title Act. A lot of people did not know that your Standard Title Act was already upgraded and amended recently. We are still 30, 40 years behind our Subsidy Title Act. And I give you an example. Due to the very bad transportation issues, public transportation all that in Sabah, everybody have to own a car. So for a typical apartment condominium owner in the past, one car park is allowed for a condominium. It's impossible. The double park everywhere, they have nightmare. And recently, the Sabah government have increased a new requirement that you must provide 2 car parks for a 3-bedroom apartment, and for a 2-bedroom, you have to provide a 1.7 car park. All these extra costs to build extra car parks in a condominium apartment issues is so expensive to pass on to the poor buyer. Here's a going green. Here's a dilemma. It's food for thoughts. Going green to save the environment and also the climate change issue actually is easily can be adopted for those people who can afford a house. But you must pity for those people who can't afford a house, who are poor. Going green issue is in fact the last thing on your mind. So the policy maker of government is always want to improve a better quality of life, So like mentioned earlier, for government to make a policy on the green and then to think of the poor for affordable homes, that's an issue where we need to find a common balance. Government are also in a dilemma for quality housing. and affordable low-cost housing, because, as I mentioned earlier, the government must make a policy, a new policy for like where they have zoning for low density, medium density, and high density. At the moment, the poor developer have to pay all these extra costs, you know, like plot ratio, not this one. Sorry, yeah. You know, oh, yeah, sorry. Like the plot ratio and things. Never mind. The plot ratio of issues. At the moment in Sabah, 1 acre we are allowed to have 80 units of apartment. But if it's a low cost, it can be up to 120. So the government need to look into maybe allowing for high density, for a bigger plot ratio, so that we can create and build more affordable and cheaper housing. But of course, the quality of life and the unit will be smaller. So this is a policy which the government has to meet and discuss with everybody, the feedback. The other issue is the 30% allocation for the bumi lots. So this extra cost is passed on to the other 70%. Another issue is a lot of government agencies were given an allocated land to do housing, but somehow they end up joining venture with private developers to do commercial development, and only a small portion is left to do low-cost housing. Sorry, I was meant to remove the above and below to making profit, so it was not meant to be there. My apology. Okay. Yeah. In general, a lot of this issue has been spoken on and discussed. I just go straight to the summary. The high cost of affordable homes actually is due to the income and the GDP growth in Sabah, Malaysia. It did not increase to follow the rate of inflation as compared to other countries. That's why house price in other countries are in fact more expensive than Sabah, Malaysia. But it is still more affordable to them compared to us, because it's very expensive due to our salary. Okay, the slow growth of our income, I think, of course, we will need foreign investors and domestic investors to increase our economic growth. So we Sabah have one major problem, is that we keep looking at the federal government side for more funding to help develop and upgrade our basic infrastructures like roads and all that. Because if you don't provide all those basic infrastructures for roads, our land will be in the closer urban areas so expensive. So we need the connectivity for jobs and things like that, for industry to create jobs, so that the housing, affordable land, cheaper, the people can buy and can relate to their housing, and instead of always having to go to the city. The rest I've already mentioned earlier, so I skip it. The rising cost of building homes, I've discussed earlier on the issues of the reason. However, one of those issues is in Sabah, we got native titles, and the land use. You want to change your land use from agriculture to say commercial or that. There's a premium which sometimes is not a clear cut. You have to convert your land use, and then the rezoning of low density to medium density. We all need.
Sorry, Dr. Jalid, 30 more seconds.
Okay, so the cabotage policy, as I mentioned earlier, the cost increase was the car costing a lot more, and then also the newspaper cost more. Of course, the other reason feedback is the time taken to approve different plans. So my intention is, I hope the government can, when it's approved, a project is for low cost and affordable home, speed up the approval, remove all the extra premium charges and land use changes and all the native title and issue, the government can waive those charges, waive those sales tax, and waive the payment. That would help assist to produce more affordable homes. So I just go right back to the last page now. So, okay. In conclusion, it is critical for our government involvement to contribute and to reduce costs for all this infrastructure, the cost to make the connectivity, to invest in our industry to create more jobs, especially in Sabah, more rural area. So thank you again.
Thank you, Datuk Jalid, for that unique perspective on Sabah. I would pass the mic again to Arkitek Mustapha, our next speaker.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I'll share my screen now. So we are talking about housing so expensive in Malaysia. Previous two speakers have been talking about the government and all those other issues. So I'm going to go straight, and this is my top mind about what is actually happening. So I always ask this 5 big question, and I'm going to deal with the very nature of us, which is actually design, and also the rules that we have in order to play the game of doing housing. So it will be talking about how we are going to approach it and how it has to be altered or modified. So yes, it's very, very expensive, and you look here from all the states, it's seriously unaffordable. I think Dr. Carmelo can attest to it, and this is actually the latest one under the median multiple approach, and this is very, very sad. So I think we need to actually look back at how we actually first start our drawings, and we have so many guidelines. We are actually a nation where we have so many design guidelines, so many preferable rules. So we have to actually look at it. Okay, in our country, you have many kinds of houses. You got the affordable housing. You got also the housing which is for the rich. But if you look properly, the rules for playing those games to actually make this housing is the same for the high income and also for the affordable. You know, like for instance, the setbacks. Look in the car parking requirement ratios. Look also at the road width. All the same. But in soccer, when you play a Olympic size game, you have to have a different size of soccer field. When you play futsal, it's a different kind of field, and you have different kind of players also. So we need to actually retailor, and we have to look back at how and where we actually come from. So we need to actually look back at all this, and we need to question, and we need to actually really, really look at all these provisions. Road width, before we even go further, before just our road width was 12 meters, about 40 feet. Now they ask us to go for 15 meters, 50 feet. Why? And I think that is also going to be an additional cost, because 30% of all the developments will be infrastructure costs. Then apart from that, you've got green planting strips that you have to provide. What are they for? We have to actually look at the bigger picture. It has to be, how should I say, good for somewhere, like for instance, leading for some to go from one park to another park. So we have to look at that. Densities. I've done tests that if we actually omit a lot of these things, you can go as far as 18 units per acre for terrace house. And we need to look at housing size also. Remember in Ampang, they do have houses that can still fit and create better living conditions and also better community living. So, and also another part is back lanes. You know, so we did previously in our Kata Kota 3, we did talk about this, and I got to actually know an architect from Majid Pembangunan Hang Jaya, and I would like to share some of his works also, apart from what I'm going to actually talk further, that they have complied and also used this as a creative way to solve this problem. So we need to actually look at how design and how we can actually work with the government to actually reduce all these requirements where you don't actually need to increase those widths of roads, the usage of back lanes for our design. So with this, this is the name of the architect from Majid Pembangunan Hang Jaya. he actually now created and have also consulted with Bomber and also complied with all these requirements of the UBL and also the Street and Drainage Act. These are all able to be done, and they are doing it now in Malacca. So I think we need to learn from other people as well. And these are all the party walls requirements under Building Law 86 UBL. So it can be done. And looking at also your backlanes requirements. So we need to understand that there are more to just doing housing. We need to question back the rules that were given to us. We need to actually work with the powers that may be, that by reducing all this, you can actually have that affordable housing. You know, people in that affordable criteria, they love the vibrancy in the density. They love the primacy in this chaos, organized chaos. So we need to actually look at that and look at the planting strip 2 meters around the boundary. For what purpose? But if you actually give it to the back, and you create a better design for a better urban design, I would go for that rather than having around the perimeter. So we need to actually question all these issues. So to me, we need to go back to very basic, the rules, and also how we actually going to approach this. Oh no, right now in our period now, DBKL is going for this PS KL 2040 and also PT KL 2040. Shah Alam is going for their what we call local plan 2035. We need to request and look at that form, and we need to actually work with them to ensure that we can do this. I think we can, because that will actually reduce the house price, because that's the house price will actually be made affordable. I think that's my take for the moment. I will accept question and answer later.
Oh, thank you, Arkitek Mustapha. Very good timing control on your part. So we move on to our next speaker, Dr. Asrul Mahjuddin. Please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman Arkitek Sarly. A lot has been mentioned pertaining to policies, design, and uniform building bylaw, etc., and what is happening the other side of the house. Nevertheless, I just want to bring in a bit of topic slightly different. I call it do it or do it, money or money. My name is Asrul Aminuddin. I'm from UC Malaya, Faculty of Built Environment. So my research group is called SUPRE. And we did a lot on this high-rise housing, which was ironically the first Prime Minister did high-rise housing. It's not meant to house a house or house the people. It's for a political statement. Can you believe that? The first Prime Minister of Malaysia is actually build a high-rise housing for a political statement, nothing to do with building a house. Yeah, and the site is currently where Isogo now. It was supposed to complete in 1957, but it complete almost a year after independence. So this is a bit of snapshot where is Lembah Pantai. So sustainable, you call it SUPRE. It has a couple of areas: housing, urban design, real estate, economic management, and planning. So our interest is basically just outside the gate of University Malaya. So because UM has this idea of university for community, so we're going to serve the community around the outside gate of both Bangsa Gate and KL Gate. Oh, housing is so expensive. Oh, so expensive, yeah. I think it's so expensive. Maybe let's see it, whether there's the devil outside or the devil inside. Is it the devil outside the house, which is, I think, a couple of factors has been mentioned, or is it the devil inside the house, which is those people actually wanted to buy or wanted to use? Yeah, let me get into the point. This is a cartoon, easily available in Facebook. I just got this couple of days because I want to express this point. You know, this point of our society. You know, our society has this pressure on the younger generation, and then our generation goes all pressure again in the other generation. And this has the implication to what the Carmelo has mentioned. Our society, whether you're Malay, Chinese, India, sekolah kat mana? What is school? Nak jadi apa? You know what you want to be, what's your, and then comes the serious bit. Bila nak kahwin? When you gonna get married? And then berapa anak? Yeah, so bila nak kahwin tu berapa anak? So you start talking about, I'm not gonna have a living, I'm gonna have a house. And then the magic question, bila nak beli rumah? It's never been a question, bila nak rent rumah, bila nak sewa rumah. It's always bila nak beli rumah. Yeah. So, budget 2020, this has been mentioned. Yeah, and the political parties, both sides, left and right, make a hoo-ha about it, who support who, but they don't talk, isn't it? It's political, but what is inside the budget that's supposed to be the taxpayers actually trying to contribute. Yeah, so this is a younger generation, you know. Later on, I will mention this younger generation towards the end of my slides. I'm not sure whether the younger generation, whether you're in the college or you just graduate, whether you read these papers or you read the news in the internet, you begin to understand, you know, the economy or the power of your money or your wallet, or you know, even know how to balance your account or your pocket money. You know. So at the end of the day, what the government offered? The government offer almost the same, slightly different, you know. This is the money we're supposed to gain immediately on, and why not? You know, we put it in later years. You know, government will extend their stamp duty exemption, and then increase instead of 200,000, make it 500,000 now. You know, so because perhaps they want to catch those people who might still in the job or wanted to look for a house, give the exempt duty lah. You know, then there'll be talk about big data, you know, where to rent to own. So where to rent to own is something that I think the government begin to look at, and I think the Khazanah has tried to research this quite a number of occasions. Yeah. So let's assume that you guys in the below 30s, the magic number here in KL is 3,000, 3,000 ringgit lah, you know, 3,000 ringgit. So if you graduate, if you're lucky, you can earn 3,000 ringgit, 3,000 ringgit. So if you are engineer or an architect, maybe roughly plus minus, for you to own a motorbike interest-free 10 months, but for you to have a deposit for about 300 over 1,000, 7.3 years. 7.3 years, then only can have a deposit. But if you are, let's say, a retail person, you want to buy a house, put up a down payment, gonna take you about almost 20 years. So where do we lead this, you know? Where do we go around? Yeah. What I'm trying to give here is that for those potential house buyer or people looking to buy a house, you know, let's put a mirror on in front of you, the younger generation. So it comes back to the question, you know, this is a big cartoon, you know, the guy calculate the amount of financial, you know, constraint and then discuss with the acquaintance, you know. It will take me to marry you about 5.27 years after I got enough money to do the kenduri, you know, the whatever hantaran. Yeah. But nevertheless, actually, the number of people who are staying in the apartments that I've shown to you earlier was that average is about 5 plus. That's why we have about 5 point something number of people in the apartment of the PPR. Where this 0.7, 0.8 comes in, you know, in average. What later? So our research in those high-rise apartments, yeah, it says that quite a number of people actually own more than one cars, you know. I thought they're supposed to be poor and, you know, they're not supposed to own cars or share cars. Yeah, but nevertheless, there are also a number of people who does not own cars in the high-rise housing PPR project. Yeah, we got plenty of that in Lembah Pantai, you know. So where does this, how can this be? You know, maybe husband and wife. Now, one of the reasons is that our Malaysian economy is pushing to the direction of owning a car. Kita ada period 2, kita ada proton, kita ada proton plus gili, etc. So the economy is pushing us to own a car rather than build up a good public transport and then we can go green, you know. And on the other side is that on motorbikes, so there's a couple of big number of chunk of the respondent actually owns more than just one motorbike. Well, obviously there's also a chunk number which is almost half of that 24.5% actually use public transport, which is good. Because Lembah Pantai is, you know, has good public transport. Technically, the only problem is that frequency in the quality of service. That's the only problem. Okay lah, you know, comes back to you guys. Comes back to you guys is that you have you own a couple of amount of money. One side is that you are very happy. The other side is that you end up with only 1,990 ringgit in debt. I think the only problem with the youngsters is that the way they manage their finances. So, this is the thing about Malaysian. Every students in the universities or coming into university going to graduate. Yeah, the moment you graduate, whether you borrow money, whether somebody pays you the money, you know, the money is gone for the expenses. Yeah, so in public education, you know, roughly in architecture and humanities 7,000. Medicine obviously double, but if you go to the private, that's 20 times. Yeah, but nevertheless, that's what happened to you guys. Yeah, the youngsters.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Dr. Asrul, 30 more seconds.
30 more seconds. No, I thought I got 20. Okay, never mind. So, all right. This is, you have a scroll that the size of maybe a couple of grams, and you carry a burden of your debt. Yeah. And the Khazanah has looked at the area of housing demand and housing supply, you know, whether there's a mismatch or not. You know, I quickly go to, unbelievable. Pulau Pinang in Seramang is actually severely unaffordable. Why can't they just like, you know, look at it and maybe we can, you know, own a living and then rent. So what's going to happen next? Actually, our studies there, only about 5% plus minus doesn't want to stay in the people, they want to go out. The rest is okay. They say okay. Majority of them is okay. So there's nothing wrong. So dulu lain, sekarang lain. You know, there's an empty nest generation terminology in the early of the century where their kids go away, the parents stay there. But in the 80s, there's a word called boomerang generation. Actually comes from the boomerang kids, where the kids comes back to the house where the parents live and they have to stay. So this is the slides all over again. Yeah, and but nobody asks, you know, the question. Let's discuss quality housing. Let's discuss affordable housing, but never mind lah the quality. But nevertheless, it comes back, do it or do it. With that, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay home. Sorry for the extra 1 minute.
No. Thank you, Dr. Asrul, for your do it or do it. Without further ado, I would like to call upon our last speaker, Arkitek Nasha. Please do share your slides.
Okay. Basically, the first slide is basically the table that everybody is showing, and I think that was the probably what started this whole discussion about why or how do we why is it that housing is becoming so expensive in Malaysia? While everybody is saying that the houses is seriously unaffordable, I would say that I'm not.
Hello, Arkitek Nasha, are you there? I think we are having a very difficult connection. I've been advised to proceed with question and answers. I'm not sure how that would go. Maybe Arkitek Nasha, you still have some time. Hello. So I think Secretariat, can you please unshare the screen so we can have our discussion?
Yeah.
Let's not keep the.
Basically, basically,
Sorry, Tanisha, you got cut in and out, so a lot of your presentation we cannot understand. So
hear me now?
Yes, we can. You're left with another 5 minutes.
That's why if I don't talk, I don't think you will.
Hello. Your connection is really unstable. We hear bits and pieces of you. So I think to move on, I think unfortunately we have to move on because unfortunate that these things happen.
May I suggest?
Yeah.
Nasha, can you off your video? Maybe the video is actually using up your Wi-Fi, so then you can show a slide much faster. Off your video for a moment, then just let the slide go. Thank you.
Yeah, I think talk without your video.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, if you just go back to the first slide, which is the slide which is about everybody is showing about the unaffordability of. So look at the other tape, the chart beside it, which is in Kelantan, Terengganu, and Pahang, which showing the overhang of the property overhang. So if you look at that, you'll be wondering if the housing is so seriously unaffordable, then how? Which is basically the house which is for the number of the state, the size of the state, the population. Okay. If you can go to the next slide, which the next slide is basically what in these three states happen to be the lowest rank in the Malaysian economy.
Hello. Sorry, I think we got cut off again with
and we don't have large housing projects, and attempts that we undertook in the 90s, especially in the middle of the 90s when Malaysian economy was at its height. We did try to develop a number of projects, and I think if you don't mind going to, can you move to the next slide? The next two slides.
Next, please.
Is it still the same slide? It looks like still the first one. Anyway, I just go through this. Basically, in 1995, when I first came back to Terengganu, and 1990s was remembered as a time of a very strong economic growth. And I think that was the time when the states and all the developers were jumping into the bandwagon of trying to develop large projects. And sadly to say that almost every one of them failed. And I had one project which we started in 1999, 1,200 units, and as of a few days ago, and I checked, only slightly more than half has been built. The rest, they do not know when. So without the large projects in the East Coast states, I'm not very sure about Pahang because I've not had any project in Pahang, but I have projects in Kelantan and Terengganu. And if you look at Kelantan and Terengganu, you will see that the projects are normally small. And when we talk about small, I would put it in a few categories. One is the lowest category, which is below 4 units. Developers are building houses in below 4 units because, and which I consider them as a hobbyist developers because they want to remain below the threshold for licensing under HDA. Then the other group of developers is developing from 5 to 10 houses, or maybe 5 to 12 houses, because 12 houses is the threshold for TMB asking for a substation. And then there's another level which is from 11 to 30 units, because this is the threshold. Anything above 30, AWK will ask for a central treatment plant. So if you look at Terengganu and Kelantan, you can say that anything above 30 is already considered as serious player. So if you look at in one of my table, it shows that the number of developers registered with REDA in Pahang is only 90, Terengganu is about 33, and Kelantan has a slightly more. And the reason is that nobody wants to be a developer. Not many people wants to be a real developer. They just want to develop things which is within their affordability, which people can buy. So now let's just go to the issue of affordability. I think what we are discussing today is about why the houses are expensive. And I think what is expensive in KL, in Klang Valley, it cannot be compared to what is expensive in Terengganu. Because if you are in Terengganu, or Kelantan for that matter, and we are no longer talking about the houses below 100,000, because the government official low cost houses is set at 80,000. Last year it was only 68,000, and anything above 350,000 is already considered luxurious in this area. Because why? Why is because if you have $350,000, you can actually buy a piece of land costing around 50,000-60,000, maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes away from city, from Kuala Terengganu. Then you can build your own bungalow, which costs maybe 100 to 150 ringgit per square feet. So this is the whole perspective is different. If you talk about 350,000 ringgit in KL, you can only get I think most now you can only get a service apartment or a single studio. So that is why again I'm questioning about the report by Bank Negara about unaffordability, because I believe that this report is much more developer centric. It's trying to show that houses that cannot be built, or houses built that cannot be sold. And so if you look at this, you will say that.
Sorry, Arkitek Nasha, 30 more seconds.
Yeah, let me finish that. Anyway, I mean, if you want to talk about affordability, what we should be talking about as architect is how do we make houses, how do we make it easyable, make it easy for people to own a house? Because owning a house, because affordability now, when we're talking about affordability, we are talking about your bankability. You are talking about whether your secret report give you a positive remark. And there are a lot of people. I mean, you look at the houses in Kelantan and Terengganu. People are buying the 100 to 350 range, despite their poverty line, despite their being below the affordable range to banks. So I don't know, probably they have secret income, and for us to do this, I think the whole issue is about to me, especially when you are in the smaller states like Kelantan, Terengganu, I think we should be looking at land. The issue is if the government can provide land, then we should be able to increase the number of housing which people can afford, and which sometimes which they don't need loans. Because our problem is that when we do housing, and we compare housing and self-built housing, is that self-built housing can take you a year or 2 years to complete, or even more, 2-3 years to build. You can build it over the weekends. But we talk about housing, and you look at our current regulations that you have to finish. If you submit for 100 units, you have to finish 100 units before you can get your CCC. And these are the things that we should be changing from our perspective, because from a smaller town, from our view here, we should be making housing easier to own, easier to build, rather than easier to buy from developers. I think that I would end at that point for now.
Thank you, Arkitek Nasha, for persevering even though with all those technical issues that we have. I think we will proceed to our discussion phase now. There have been a stream of questions via Facebook Live as well as our Zoom chat and Zoom question and answers group. So let me kick off with this. I think the question on a lot of people's mind, even before we had this discussion, that is that, as mentioned by Dr. Carmelo, we have an overhang of nearly 20 billion ringgit, or most of which are affordable housing, but still the nation has a housing crisis, an ownership crisis, a renting crisis. So there is a disjoint in these two perceptions. Maybe the panelists can highlight where is the actual what is the actual core issue that causes this disjoint.
Can I answer for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Later, Dr. Carmelo, maybe. As I pointed out, as what also Architect Nasha was saying, is how we actually creatively use the land. You know, in KL now, if you look at PSKL 2040, we are only having 36 hectares of buildable land left for 2040. That's discounting all the slopes and all the others, forest reserve. So that is actually a very serious issue. So we need to relook at how we design houses and all the guidelines that goes with it in order for us to move forward. We cannot do the same way as we do now. You know, as Einstein said, you use the same method over and over again, you get the same result. You not move forward. You actually go backwards. So I think that's my take.
Okay, Dr. Carmelo.
Yeah, I think there is also a problem of perception, in the sense that Malaysia real estate market is moving toward being more and more similar to the real estate market of a developed nation. So in a developed nation, you don't buy a house when you are fresh graduated. It's the investment of your life. Let's say for the normal working class people or professionals, it is normal to take 20 to 25 years loan if you want to buy a house in the place where you live and work. The period of incredibly high returns on houses and land are gone forever. So it's no more the case that you buy a house at 500,000 and you sell it at 3 million in the span of 5 or 10 years. This is not going to happen anymore. Plus, we have an issue with, not an issue, I mean, it's a change of perspective from the new generations. While the past generations were focusing on buy a house as soon as possible, so build stability, the new generations want mobility. They want to have maybe three times holidays a year, or be free to go to work abroad. And you can't save to buy a house and go for holidays 3 times a year at the same time. You have to make a choice. Which are your preferences? So this is my first point. The second point is that probably very simply no demand for those houses. If there is an overhang of things that are affordable, probably there is no demand. Probably people are recurring to the secondary market, as I mentioned, where 80% of the transactions happen. And then we should ask then to the developers, why are you keep on building if nobody is buying these homes? This is a question that is puzzling me since I've been in Malaysia for the past 9 years. How is it possible to keep on building things that nobody wants?
Right. Any other panelists? Dr. Asrul?
Yeah, I'd like to add on a bit. Is that what I highlighted just now regarding money is that the current generation, most of the from the university, the moment they get out of the university, they're already in minus 40,000 to minus about maybe 60 to 70,000. They are in debt already. So they are in debt. So, and due to the social media pressure, etc., and whatever the external pressure or external influences, they are more concerned of the idea of lifestyle rather than look into the economy of sustainability of themselves. So when times comes in, that's the reason the problem of the younger generation. There's a lot of bankruptcy for for this younger generation. I mean, there's always also a pressure with you know, with some part of the society. You must have a house, you know. Kalau tak ada rumah, you know, you're not somebody, you know. I mean, it's almost like if you rent a house, it's not good, lah. The image is not good, you know. I mean, it's what's wrong with rent to own, you know? And then rent to own has been the idea has been quite some time, you know. I mean, let's look into this idea. I mean, there's already overhang, fine. There's already something that has been built and then nobody buy it. But why not if we rent it? But the ability is that whether the politicians want to sit down and answer this. The reason why I put that cartoon is that not so much of the girl headache of the budget. It's actually the other side of the coin of the story, you know. Whether the politician has the political will to address this without, you know, worry first who's going to vote for them. Yeah. And that's my second take. My first take is that it's more like, you know, for the younger generation or the generation that's coming in from outside the university, coming in to work. Yeah. The second part is that the willingness of the government, the willingness into the policy, making policy in hard choices, but maybe that's correct choices.
You're talking about a strong government. I think when you talk about politics, it's always a reflection of what the people want, right? So perhaps no will among the people to really move the agenda across. Segueing into Datuk Jalid, who's also involved in politics, perhaps.
Okay, for people in Sabah, and I'm thinking Malaysia also, our family unity is very, very close. So generally, when the children, especially the first child, want to buy a home, the parents usually steps in to help. That's why a lot of time it's near impossible for a graduate or whatever, taking 10 years to afford a house. But being in Asian here, the family parents can't contribute. It does create that market that they do buy a house under their name. So this is an area where a lot of people did not look into. Thank you.
Thank you. Nasha?
Sorry, can I just pick one? Just add to what Datuk mentioned. Just pick one. Is that what worries me and then worries when we did the research is that we begin to have this boomerang kids, boomerang generation. You know, the problem is that the house that can contain about maybe 5 to 7 people begin to contain about more than 10 people, and I don't think this is becoming socially a very healthy outcome going to be.
It will lead to social problems. Yes, Nasha, you were saying. Okay, I think we lost Arkitek Nasha again. Never mind.
Can you hear? You still cannot hear me?
Yeah, it's there is a gap. We just suddenly see you. Can you hear me? That's all.
Yeah. Every time I speak, they will say unstable.
Them to buy a small apartments first. You know, those 2 bedroom apartments at the moment. The parents help them, not buying a mansion.
Yeah. I think it's a systemic issue, right? I mean, there's many as mentioned by most of you. There's a lot of smaller contributors that are actually contributing to the bigger picture, and I think it's not as simple as Dr. Carmelo mentioned. PIR only is a very complex issue with a systemic social implication, and also there's an income disparity that we have been talking about. There's a huge load of questions, especially from both our Facebook and Zoom chat. One of the key questions here that been mentioned a couple of times is that with all this data from NAPIC and all that, does it take into consideration investors who are non-domiciled? That means the people who are just buying homes for investment, people who are buying like 5 houses, 6 houses for investment purposes and not actually to stay. Is this factored into any of our data?
Sorry, may I answer to that, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. For those investors who buy a house and then rent it out, on the other side of the coin, you know, in terms of, you know, our research more on the qualitative rather than it is more on the quantitative. You know? That's why the last slide is that, hey, anybody wants to talk about quality house? houses or housing. Yeah, so it's fine that they have a house, they got a bigger chunk of money. The top 10% has approximately between 10 to 12K of disposable income. But nevertheless, if they decided to rent the houses, it's fine. I mean, although on one side the argument is that these are the people who contribute the increase of the price of the houses, but we can talk about chicken and egg situation. But my only take is that if you decided to rent a house, or maybe the government can play a part to tax this a bit. If you got 10 houses and then you want to have a chunk of your income on rental, that is fine. But then it had to be taxed properly, and then so that the tax money comes back to the people.
Okay. In our Zoom chat, Arkitek Hauzi asked that how do we get all the authorities to speak the same language with regard to design guidelines? What is the opinion of the panels?
Abolish the authorities.
I would like to answer that.
Yes, please.
Political will.
Yes, Arkitek Mus.
Okay, we've been doing this from top down and also sideways. So what I'm trying to say is, at all these points where they are doing the review of all their local plans and also their structure plans, this is where we should come in to actually show them that if we go the same way that we are doing all this time, this will lead to a total failure of even to build a house, because you'll be left with just pockets of land. How do you develop that? So we need to actually relook at all these developments. And to add to that, if we are looking at COVID-19 now, it shows that cities, having to densify cities doesn't work also. You need to actually move out. When government already building a lot of these MRTs, LRTs, and also public transportation, let alone public buses. So I think we need to move out from that bandwagon of everything must happen in the central city. I think one area that we really like is in Selangor, especially, is actually, if you look in the map, is actually on the southwestern side, not southeastern side, southwestern side of Selangor. Okay.
Right.
I think Nasha also, got that point. He's trying to say something just now. Thanks.
Yeah. I think this next question is for Arkitek Nasha. Muhammad Adam Muhammad asked, the question is that, can we architects reduce the price to as low as RM 10,000? Think outside of the box, because if China can make an entire COVID hospital in 2 weeks, surely we can, because NGOs cannot solve the problem, contractors cannot solve the problem, it needs a holistic effort. So is it up to the architects? If not the architects, who? So
I tried to answer that. I typed the answer there, but I think the answer is not in the architect, is not in the studies bank. The answer is in the people. The people has to decide whether what kind of housing that they want. Because I mean, with my experience living in smaller cities, developers are moving smalls. No, they don't go big, because big is equals to failure. They failed in so many times. Purchasers has experienced the brunt of housing failure in the 80s in Terengganu. If you're a developer in Terengganu, if nobody knows you, you may be a big name from KL. You try to start a housing project here, nobody will pay a deposit until they see the roof and they are sure that you can finish the house. So this is the environment we should be looking at. Look at the people, make the houses easily buildable by the people. I mean, if you are staying, with the exception of maybe KL, JB, Ipoh, Penang, the rest of the country has a lot of land. The government must open up the land. I'm not saying this, but in one last slide, I did show past manifesto for Negeri Terengganu. It says that everybody above 21 years old has a right to a piece of land. No, make this something, give people land, let them build their own house, let them take their time. Because when your family is small, you can build small. You can go with the tiny house or using just a cabin. But our system does not allow that. Even our scale of minimum fee doesn't allow that. We are charging the highest to the poorest people.
Scalability of
our scale of fee is highest to the people who can at least afford it. Now, if you are an architect in Terengganu, you will know that you do not know how to charge. They are building a house costing $50,000 and you want to charge them $10,000. No, it's like taking away half of their money, their saving in their life when they need to have a house. We should be looking at this seriously. We should be willing to forego certain things. We should be willing to forego houses below 100,000. You don't need to submit plan. You don't need to have architects so that they can spend all their money to building houses. Government should be opening up lands. The existing land stock that we have, the terrace housing built in the 70s, single-story terrace house, allow them to go up to 3 stories now. There are some amazing design. Architects can come up with some amazing design, to increase the density. I think in one of my slides, I show that what we did propose in 2011. You said, why don't we allow a terrace house to be just like a townhouse? You own the house, you stay downstairs, you rent it out upstairs so that you have the money to offset your bank loans while your family is still young. And when your economy improve, you can take the whole house. And when you get old, when your children has moved out, rent it out again. I mean, these are the things that we should be looking at rather than listening only to developers. And I think the whole study by Bank Negara is from the perspective of developers and not the perspective of the people who need houses. I think that's my point.
I agree with Arkitek Nasha. I agree with Kata Nasha. That's why I say that the issue here now is we are looking at it as though that we have to let developers to survive. We cannot. We have to actually make people be the players. They are the one who's actually buying the house. That's what Arkitek Nasha is trying to do. And whatever that we have now, we are actually wasting it. You look at the land efficiency for a terrace house or bungalow is, bungalow house, you lose 50% of the land because of whatever you have to give away to the state. I think Nasha also agrees with that. Nasha?
Yep.
I do.
Yeah, I think those are very, very good points. Yeah, I think there's I'm really overwhelmed with questions here because there's so many questions. But I think just to have a sort of a narrative that we are trying to say, a summary of what everyone is trying to say from Dr. Carmelo's idea of that the problem is far more complex than it seems, and Dr. Asrul's mention of being money and societal perceptions plays a key part. Arkitek Nasha's idea that, of course, when you're talking about a different type of economy like Terengganu and Kelantan, you're talking about different scale, different affordabilities, different contexts. And of course, Arkitek Mus looking at how the actual design can help solve this. And I think all this is a very complicated and huge discussion, which we need 2 days to a 2 days conference to actually discuss it properly. And I don't think that our 20 minutes here that we are spending does it justice. We are already closing in our closing time, so I will go around the table to give everybody an opportunity to give some closing statements. I'm sorry for all those people who are asking questions, so many questions, I think about 20 over questions, 30 questions that we don't have time to answer. I will start with Datuk Jalid.
Thank you. For me, I look at it, the interest rate for housing is the lowest ever in the history of Malaysia. So if economy pick up and the people get the jobs back, I think it would be cheaper to borrow a loan to buy a house. And as I said from the beginning, the government must step in to contribute their share, to waive all those premiums, extra charges for rezoning, for land conversion, all that, especially for developers who are building affordable homes. And also, federal government should come in and step in to upgrade and do our infrastructures and transportation, because otherwise the local developer has to pay this cost to the actual development, and then ends up the buyer paying for it.
Right. Right, very good point, Datuk Jalid. Arkitek Mus, your last words, parting words.
As I said, look at it differently. We got to do business unusual, or else we get unusual results later. So we need to be optimistic. If we don't become optimistic, how the hell are we going to tell the government out there that we can actually create better products, better design, and better affordability housing to these people? Because
Right.
it is in us. It's our duty as architect. We are born to actually be creative in that way, under duress. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, rethink the system, change the system. Great. Dr. Carmelo.
Yeah, a concluding thought that I think is very important, because many of my co-panelists mentioned the issue of basically supply side obstacles that make homes unaffordable or less affordable. And I think this should be brought in a more vociferous way into the policy debate.
Right.
That was also mentioned in my past papers. And on this, I probably invite the PAM, the Architect Association, to be more engaged in the policy debate. And I think we can do some work together on this perspective.
Great. Yeah, I think the issue of complying costs is always very high up there, and on the supply side. Definitely, I think PAM under the council and under HUW will take on the challenge. Arkitek Nasha, any last words?
There is no one solution that can fit to all the problems, because we are talking about different location, different geographic conditions, different social structures, and so housing should be looked from this perspective to each locality, and it should grow from the need of that locality. You cannot, because what I see now is that we are forcing what is best in KL, Shah Alam, JB, Penang to the small town like Marang and Kuala Berang, and we are destined to fail. Simple as that.
Right.
Let us grow. Let be flexible in the regulations, in the laws, so that we can develop our own architecture, our own housing for our locality.
Right.
Yeah.
So more a more local context approach, more local context sensitive approach. Was that's what you're promoting. Very good idea.
Yeah.
Dr. Asrul.
Thank you, Arkitek Sarly. My take is this: that at the end of the day, we do this housing for people to live. Yeah, there's a lot of quantitative matters, dollar and cents, how to be built, etc. But even Khazanah mentioned this in their last working paper, rethinking housing, is that very seldom people wants to discuss about quality housing. What's a quality housing for people who being described as the lower income group, or quality housing for the high income group, forget it lah, But for this, the other side of what is a good quality houses. Let's not just follow the uniform building by law. 80 square feet and then 100 square feet, and then the last room is the bigger room is 120 square feet. But at the end of the day, these are people who's going to their families, their kids, their parents, their families who's going to use these spaces, and then not just spaces inside the house but also outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asrul. I think that is a very, very valid point. It's not just a numbers game. It's not just about quantities. It's about the quality of the houses that we are producing to fit the need of the country. So before I thank everyone and end the session, I've been told by the organizers that we have one sort of like a photo session before we go off. So
Before
everyone,
that,
so we have two sessions. First, okay.
So,
yes, Salam.
Yes, Arkitek Mus.
yeah, sorry. I think because I'm apart from just Dr. Asrul and also Puan Nozakia, I think we will take all these questions and we will discuss it in our HUW and we'll formulate as what we agreed in the setting up of this Kata Kota, the end series of this Kata Kota, where we actually amalgamate all the people from various areas of the country. Then we can make a what called position paper to the government, and I think Dr. Carmelo's background will actually be used as this. I think agreeable to that, right, Arkitek Nur Zakia? I think that's the reason why we.
Yes, I agree with that. We have to compile all the questions so that everybody will be aware of this, and then can be read and we can send to the government, see what we have seen and what we have concluded here. Okay, I agree with
Thank you, Arkitek Zakia. I think that is the whole core of the Kata Kota series. Yeah. I think before we go to those closing statements, better have our photo taken. Salam, can you?
Okay, all right. So all panelists ready? Those ambil ke?
Okay.
Those screenshot.
5, 3, 2, 1. No, okay, smile. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Alright, cool. Okay.
Okay, our technical team, Puan Surati, can you open your camera? Okay.
Right. 3, 2, 1. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Right.
Okay, thank you, Salam and Firdaus, our great technical team behind the scenes, and of course our Secretariat Suriati, who's doing a great job. And I would like to thank all our panelists, Dr. Carmelo, Arkitek Mus, Datuk Jalid, Arkitek Nasha, and of course Dr. Asrul, for such wonderful ideas. And as mentioned, all these ideas will be compiled for probable solutions and to move the discussion forward, and which it's impossible to conclude anything in 20 minutes that we have discussion. And as rightly said by Arkitek Nur Zakia and Arkitek Mus, all this will be compiled in the HUW discussions and hopefully will be formulated into a very good position paper that will be forwarded to the government. And we as on behalf of PAM and on behalf of HUW, invite all architects who want to contribute to please submit your ideas or submit your issues to HUW. With that note, thank you all for spending time this Saturday morning, and we'll see you again in the next Kata Kota. Bye bye.
Terima kasih. Jumpa lagi.
Terima kasih.